So today with our energy expert who is Trevor Ngwane, we're going to be looking about the uproar around prepaid electricity. We do understand that consumers are paying through the nose for electricity because of extra charges that are added when buying prepaid electricity on top of the already high electricity tariffs. And worst of all, some of these charges are not regulated. A very good morning to you, Trevor Ngwane. Thank you indeed for your time and for the fact that you're going to be unpacking this serious issue. We are stretched already as far as our pockets are concerned, and this here adds another issue as far as our um, overburdened budgets are concerned. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning and good morning to your viewers and listeners.
Okay, so let's understand why is this happening. In the past, when I'd heard about people installing prepaid meters, there's certain areas, obviously, where government has gone and installed the meters in the particular houses. Certain suburbs supposedly being seen as the wealthier class of people have to then purchase and install their own meters, obviously. What exactly is the story here? Because when those meters were initially installed in the townships, the sense was that it's going to be cost effective for the homeowners.
Yes, so the issue of prepaid meters, it's a symptom of an underlying crisis problem. On the one hand, there's a crisis of a reliable, affordable, safe, clean supply of energy for all, starting maybe with the poorest of the poor, the working class, and then going all up to the higher parts of the social structure. Unfortunately, for the lower echelons of society, the poor, working class people, the energy crisis has been ongoing, since the days of apartheid. As you know, that under apartheid, many black townships, areas, rural areas, villages did not have access to safe energy, to electricity. So they were hoping that with the new government, 1994, this problem would at last be solved. But they find themselves still struggling with reliable supply, with affordable supply. And then one of the ways in which this crisis has been addressed by the authorities has been, to emphasize, payment and to install prepaid meters as a mechanism. So that is the history. But at the moment, what happened is that the energy crisis has now reached all parts of society, with load shedding, with high energy increases. So everyone is paying attention. Everyone is affected. It is in this context that now we hear, this talk of prepaid meters. It's an ongoing struggle, but it's taking a new character because it's affecting everyone during a time of, let's say, economic constraint and economic crisis.
And sadly, you alluded to the new dispensation, the new government from 1994 onwards. Our hopes were very, very high, and we thought that lots of our past ills would be addressed. But it seems that the current government is too busy with corruption and lining their own pockets. But that being said, um, we spoke about the poorest of the poor being burdened, overburdened by this crisis. But sadly, as you've also correctly said, it's right across the board. In some instances, this fee is determined, where people live in complexes. And apartment complexes. We understand that the fee is determined by the body corporate, and there are no clear guidelines on how it should be constituted. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, all that is part of, as you correctly say, the neglect by the government, by the authorities, by ESCOM, by local government, But secondly, it's the privatization of the supply of energy to the people, to the masses. So basically, the country is moving towards a situation where it's everyone for himself or herself, where you must see to finish as to the energy sources, their reliability, their affordability. This is dividing up the country to the extent that there can be no solidarity or common outlook between the rich and the poor. Indeed, even among the poor, there's competition. Among middle classes, there's competition. The example of estates, it shows you that those who live in estates, they end up paying much more than people who live, let's say, in stand-alone middle class suburbs. Those who live in the townships, sometimes they find themselves in an area without power, without energy for weeks, sometimes for months, years on end. So it's all chaotic because the government, is failing, to take control of this issue and ensure a reliable, affordable supply of energy for all. The problem is upstairs.
Okay, we're going to come back to the issue around prepaid meters, but let's also understand we've been hearing whispers in the corridors, governmental corridors, suggesting that Eskom might be privatized. They're going to be obviously unbundling and, apportioning the different services under different managers or different entities. And what he suggested that is the road to privatization. Have you heard anything differently? And if it is correct, what I'm suggesting now, what are your thoughts? Do you think it is going to address our much needed energy issues in the country?
Privatization is not going to solve the problem because the crisis of load shedding, is exactly because of privatization, commercialization, and recently financialization of energy supply. Remember, the ANC government was told by ESCOM as early as 2005, actually much earlier, to build new power plants, new power stations. At that time, under President Thabo Mbeki, Mbeki was pushing the agenda of privatization. He did not want to spend government money building these power plants. He was looking for private companies to come in and build these. But that didn't happen. And then later, there was a crisis of shortage of energy. So privatization is behind this. We now have this issue of commercialization, where energy is a basic necessity for the economy, for the people, for the children, for schools, for hospitals. But energy is treated in a commercial way. It's buying and selling the same way you buy a pair of shoes. Lastly, we now see the entry of the banks of finance capital. You know that the IPPs, the independent power producers who are leading and controlling, the market of renewable energy, of solar power. These people get money from the banks, so they get loans from the banks to actually invest in solar energy. So you can see that our energy supply is under threat from the coming in domination of profit and not satisfying the needs of the country, of the people, of the economy. So
Okay.
the road of privatization is not a solution.
We're going to come back to the issue around privatization versus government and government's handling of the energy situation in the country right after the ad break. We are talking with Trevor Ngwane. He's an energy expert and he's also the director at the UJ Sociological for Research and Practice. So please do stay with us. Our first interview for the morning and really hot stuff, making everybody really hot under the collar.
To the comfort of my childhood than the smell of black seed oil being applied by my nanny. Now I'm using Black Seed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like Black Seed. You can find Black Seed at all leading pharmacies or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
The Turkey-Syria earthquake is among the deadliest earthquakes of the last century. Thousands have lost their lives, and large areas and cities and towns in southern Turkey and northern Syria have turned to rubble, leaving huge numbers of residents with very little or nothing at all. Al-Imdad Foundation's emergency relief team is on the ground providing life-saving aid. The people of Turkey and Syria desperately need your support. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for the late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating, and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, Now We Cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists, with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. It is exactly 18 after 8 o'clock. We are talking with energy expert, and that, of course, is Trevor Ngwane. Trevor, welcome back. We're talking about government handling the energy scenario here in our country. 30 years on, almost 30 years on, and we haven't seen any change or any improvement as far as our energy needs are concerned. In fact, the situation's getting worse by the day. I asked about the issue around privatization of the energy situation, and you suggesting that that is not an option, probably because privatization might mean that energy will come at a much higher cost. But we seem to be, as ordinary taxpayers and civilians, we seem to be between the devil and the deep blue sea. What would be the answer to the energy crisis in the country and affordable renewable energy for us as ordinary citizens?
Yes, with renewable energy, the trade unions, have called for socially owned production of renewables. So what they mean is that, these solar systems must be jointly owned by workers, by communities, by the masses. So, energy should be organized socially in a way in which that energy benefits and meets the needs of the masses. But privatization means introducing, the profit motive in the provision of energy. For example, the independent power producers, the so-called IPPs, their role will mean massive increase in the price of electricity. At the moment, their production of electricity is subsidized by the state. I think ESCOM pays them more than R2 per kilowatt hour, for each, kilowatt hour they provide. That money is still to be transferred, to be passed on to consumers. That has not even begun. So it shows you that that business model of privatizing, energy from the sun. I mean, the sun is free, for Christ's sake. So, it's just not on. You only need to put power panels on top of your roof, and then of your roof, and then you've got energy. But this thinking about how do we make profit from the energy from the sun has led to ESCOM even suggesting that those who have got solar panels must pay 900 Rand a month just because they are using the sun, even though energy does absolutely nothing, to provide that electricity. So is the thinking, our government has moved away from prioritizing the needs of the people and is busy with profit making or supporting those who make profit.
So bottom line is that everything is driven by greed. Our government has let us down. And everybody, even the independent power producers, everybody's hustling to get that extra buck. It is really, really sad. Not only as far as energy requirements are concerned, I think in every business entity in the country, everybody is hustling to make that extra bottom line. But be that as it may, let's come to the prepaid electricity uproar and why we're having this conversation in particular. We understand that vendors are not allowed to charge a tariff above what is set by the municipality, but they are allowed to charge a service or a vendor fee. And this can go up to, and this is where the exploitation comes in, because this can go up to 15% of the amount of the electricity that a consumer buys. Now, while the National Energy Regulator, that is NERSA, determines the annual tariff increases, this fee is not regulated, only approved. And that's where exploitation starts happening.
Exactly. So there is no regulation of the retail price of electricity to consumers. So is the idea of the market is a free for all. So it depends who is your vendor, where do you live, how much electricity do you use, and often you end up paying more because, as you say, everyone is hustling, trying to make a quick buck. So that way of thinking and of doing things is moving away from what uh, we call a developmental agenda, where we are striving, to provide a better life for all, where we're trying to make sure that every child born today, yesterday, tomorrow will have enough energy, enough food, shelter, healthcare. So we're moving away from that. We're moving away from understanding that solidarity, unity, that our faith is tied up with each other. We're beginning to be acting under individualism, under selfishness, under taking care of my own situation and not worrying about the next person. So I think this country, indeed the world, has to move away from that and we start to appreciate how your neighbor's fate, your neighbor's success is tied, your neighbor's well-being is tied up with your own. That's what we need.
Let's look at a comment that Nhlanhla Gumede has made. He obviously is with NERSA, and I quote: "Resellers are not licensed. The person who is licensed is a distributor. So they resell on the back of a license of a distributor, a municipality or ESCOM in this instance. So it's really just those bilateral arrangements between them. So if there was an agreement between a reseller and a distributor on a basis of a particular tariff, which they started many years ago, it's just been increasing at a particular rate every year. But also the unsaid sentence here, or the unsaid words here, is that there's just absolutely no regulation. Anyone could charge anything and get away with it.
Exactly. Now, we live under a capitalist system, but capitalism, in historically, it has taken different forms. So at the moment, we are living under what is called neoliberal capitalism. So this is a type of capitalism where the state folds its hands and does not intervene in favor of the people. In the old days, the state made sure that everyone has food, they even control the price of bread. Can you see? Now we have deregulation. The market, money, profit must take over. We've got labor flexibility. Workers must be paid any amount of money, depending on the employer. You've got, so all these new policies are there to actually expose, ordinary people to the ravages of profit and to benefit, those who have got the money, usually big business, and some of those who make money from cooperating with big business.
You alluded to the banks earlier on in the interview. Let's look at their role. Uh, we understand that there has to be a method where they can show you a detailed transaction cost from them. What you get when you buy electricity through your banking account is really only an SMS that shows the amount of electricity that you've paid for, and you get a token. But there isn't a detailed breakdown of what you're actually getting, how much of electricity are you purchasing, because they don't include all the other services that is included in that token that you've purchased. So you purchase a token for 1,000 rand, but you're not getting 1,000 rands worth of electricity. There's a whole host of hidden costs, which for some reason they're not making it transparent to you as the consumer. What do we do to insist on more transparency by the banks and other vendors?
Yes. So we as communities, we need to set up price control, price monitoring committees. Can you see? So that we can trace and see, all these additional and hidden costs on the one hand. On the other, when we get that information, we have to put pressure on the government, on the regulators, on NERSA to actually stop these practices, because these practices are just methods, nefarious methods to make money at the expense of the consumer, of ordinary people. So it's most important that ordinary people stand up, communities stand up, and they monitor what they pay for, what they are charged for. They make sure that they understand the secret hidden costs in everything that they buy. And then they unite and they demand of the government, of the regulator, to stop these nefarious money-making exploitative practices.
So, who should these committees be? Should it be entire communities as a whole? Um, should it be, where do they take their objections to? Do they take it to their local municipality? Do they take it to NERSA? We need some sort of a guideline here on how we put this plan together and start making government, NERSA, and these other parties, including the banks, accountable for all of these hidden charges. Where do we start?
Let's start with small business. So we know that the success of small business usually depends on their cooperation, for forming mutual help schemes, organizations, often, even at a household level, people form stock files, they do collective buying, People help each other, talk to each other about, where you can get a cheaper price. So that's where we must start, right at the bottom. So communities must come together. We need to find ways to ensure that we know in each and every street, the life situation of those people. We try and meet, and then we discuss various issues. I know at the moment, South Africans have got no choice but to organize, the prevention of crime. In your neighbor, in my neighbor, we've got all these people who patrol the street at night on a voluntary basis because we just have to do it. We know that when there's no lights, there are community organizations, neighbors, volunteers who actually, undertake to call ESCOM or call City Power to find out what is going on, and then they report through social media to communities. We should do the same with prices. We should talk about how much are we paying for bread, how much are we paying for energy. We should talk about how much we should share our bank statements, show each other, I paid so much, how much did you pay? And then if we do that, open up, look at each other, we're going to be able to come up with collective demands to the government, to the state. The job of NERSA is to regulate electricity prices. It has to extend it to control the retail price. What is the use of setting a broad tariff when people sell electricity with any amount of money they choose? So this is the job of the government, the job of NERSA.
So we need to hold NERSA accountable. I'm going to make two more statements and then we'll wrap up. We do know that in the 2022-23 financial year, NERSA granted Eskom a tariff hike of 3.46% per kilowatt hour. As well as more than 6% increase to cater for the regulatory clearing account, which brought the total increase for Eskom to 9.61%. Now, the RCA is an amount that usually accrues as an under recovery or money that is paid back to the power utility if it overspent above the set tariffs for a particular financial year. They seem to have been covered. What about you and I as consumers? Who and what covers us?
Exactly. So at the moment, most of the problems, as I said, they come from upstairs at the top. So the guys on top, they're only taking care of their own interests. The guys on top, whenever there's a crisis, they actually pass the consequences, the problems to ordinary people. And I mentioned that for the poorest of the poor, for working class people, this has been going on for decades, since the days of colonialism, with respect to almost everything. But now that we are free, we have to right those wrongs. It's our opportunity to actually make sure that, all the exploitation, all the hidden costs, all the stealing stops. Unfortunately, this particular government, the government of the African National Congress, has failed to do that. So it is our duty to actually stand up and demand more for ourselves, to defend ourselves. And that we can only do by taking action and not sitting back and trusting that someone or a messiah will help us.
Finally, in the past, when consumers complained about rising electricity tariffs and all these hikes and all of these hidden charges, the kind of responses we used to get in the past from City Power and Eskom, because City Power obviously gets the electricity from Eskom, what we were told was that there's wholesale stealing of electricity or energy in the townships by the residents, and there's also billions of rands in unpaid electricity accounts in the particular townships. How do you respond to that? Because then, we also again understand it's the poorest of the poor that suffer, but the rippling effect is possibly crippling the country. So the stealing of electricity, Are they stealing it because they can't afford the high prices? We've seen pictures of how electricity is stolen off the poles, the electricity poles in the townships. So it's not only the people in the townships that are suffering. The rippling effect is affecting you and I and every South African citizen in the country. Your thoughts?
Yes. So the connection of the poor to the electricity grid does not happen only in South Africa. In almost all the countries of the world, especially where there's a lot of poverty and inequality, poor people end up finding ways of getting, a supply of energy. Remember, without electricity, you have, in South Africa, it's something we know very well, so-called fires in shack settlements. People die, lose their possessions, children die inside shacks, people lose everything, including their IDs, their papers, because a candle dropped down. Also, remember, when people use paraffin, when people use the brazier in Baula, there's also health consequences. So, in fact, in modern life, the safest, the cleanest way to actually provide energy for the household, for domestic use, it is electricity. So when people access electricity without official sanction, it's a struggle for survival, because without it, they don't actually can cope. They die, they get sick. So that is why it is the responsibility of a government, of the state, to ensure that there is enough safe, clean, reliable, affordable energy for all. We should not blame the poor for their poverty, for their struggle to survive, but rather we should help them so that they don't have to engage in desperate activities. Because remember, illegal connection can also, so-called, can also lead to, accidents. Yeah. So really, I think that, the problem here is that our government, our state, our society is not providing reliable energy for all.
And all of this we put squarely at the door of this ineffective government of ours. Trevor Ngwane, energy expert and director at UJ of Sociological for Research and Practice. Thank you indeed for your insights on this very delicate and urgent matter regarding electricity availability, clean energy to all of South Africa. Thank you indeed. God bless.
Thank you.
It is exactly 8:37. News and views right here on Salam Media. Standing by to talk with us in a minute or two is Fatima Kaisi, an AMA representative in Lebanon. We're going to be looking at the Yasmin Campfire Emergency Appeal. So please